The Panthers got a little bit of a pickup after Sam Reinhart got ejected for a game misconduct. We're going to discuss the home and home next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, January 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. You can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Shout out to those everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets, even if your first bet wins. Visit FanDuel to get started. So the Florida Panthers, they wrapped up the first part of the home and home against the Anaheim Ducks on Saturday night with a 3-0 shutout win against Anaheim, a shutout for Spencer Knight, and a game where the Panthers needed to juggle their lines a little bit with Sam Reinhart going for a check and got the knee of Isac Lundestrom to get a game misconduct, but the depth comes through with Jesper Boqvist and Anton Lundell, and then Gustav Forsling getting the empty net at the end for a 3-0 shutout win for the Florida Panthers over the Anaheim Ducks. And here to recap the first part of the home and home and the rest of it here on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. He is from the Puck podcast, a podcast that has been running for almost 20 years going, got ahead of the podcast game, and a Ducks fan as well. One of the co-hosts is here. Doug Stolhand is here. So, Doug, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much, Armando. Good to talk with you again. Appreciate you joining us on our show in the past, and happy to join you and talk some Anaheim Ducks hockey.
Yeah, so if you did not, for the listeners out there, if you did not catch my episode with Doug last week, I went on the podcast and talked all things Florida Panthers, and I also joined his co-host Eddie Garcia back in June to discuss everything for the Florida Panthers during their run to the Stanley Cup back then. So grateful to be joining, and two guys from Southern California who love to talk hockey. And first of all, Doug, I want to wish that you and everybody over there in your neck of the woods that all the best that has been going on with the California wildfires. I saw that at center ice for the LA Kings that they are dedicating it to the Los Angeles Fire Department. So first of all, I want to say that I hope that you and your family are safe.
Yes, we are, and thank you very much. And that was a very classy move by the Kings because, as you and any hockey fan knows, it's no small feat to change your ice design during the season. You have to melt the ice, redo the paint, freeze the rink again, and whether they keep that all season or not, we will see. But I thought that was a very classy move by the Kings, who were on the road at the time of the wildfires, so had that opportunity to do that before they came home. And it's been a wild couple weeks, obviously, in Southern California, and it's very much like cancer in the sense that if you didn't get affected, you definitely know somebody that got affected. Everybody in Southern California knows somebody that either lost their home entirely, lost a portion of their home, or had to evacuate due to proximity. So it was a hectic couple of weeks. It's nice to have the distraction of hockey to watch and care about little things like power plays and penalty kills and things that don't actually matter, as opposed to life-changing and life-threatening situations.
Yeah, for sure. And we hope the best to everyone out there. But speaking of the hockey and talk about power play and everything for the Florida Panthers against the Anaheim Ducks, the two expansion brothers from back in 1993 there, at the time called the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim for them. But to recap Saturday's game, it's for the Florida Panthers side of things, crazy what happens when you stay out of the penalty box for the rest of the game. For them, the Panthers took two penalties, and one of them being the 5-minute major that Sam Reinhart had on the check to Isac Lundestrom there, which First of all, I believe that was the right call for Sam Reinhart to get the game misconduct. He meant to go with the shoulder, but ended up getting the knee. So a fast play for Reinhart there, and did get the knee there. The Panthers did have to adjust after, but really for them, it really came to just how well they protected the neutral zone after that. And then it really manifested in the second goal by Anton Lundell. But the Panthers, after going through a little bit of a drought for multiple guys on the lineup, Jesper Boqvist picks him up once again after getting the goal on the quick entry for the Panthers. But I just want to get your thoughts on the check from Sam Reinhart, and also if you were able to provide us the status of Isac Lundestrom after that.
Well, Lundestrom is still listed as day-to-day. He has not been put on IR. So that, I guess, is a good sign that it's not a season-ending or long-term injury. You certainly would think that if there was going to be something like that, it may have happened. But we also know that they may be waiting for swelling to go down to do further testing and see what the actual interior damage is. He definitely was injured. It's definitely something that's going to keep him out. I would think I would be gobsmacked if he took the ice on Tuesday in the rematch. So we'll see about that. But no real update on him other than he's injured and we're waiting to hear the severity and how long he's going to be out.
Yeah.
The hit itself, I know Reinhart is not a dirty player. He's never had any disciplinary problems with the NHL before, but that doesn't take away from the fact that that was a dirty play. And I don't think he took the ice, obviously, thinking I'm going to light up in Isac Lundestrom. There's no beef between the two. It was simply he was going in on the forecheck and saw a guy that was going to get past him, reacted like a human being would to try and get in his way. The thing that's unfortunate, though, is you can't stick out your knee like that because of exactly what happened. He hit Lundestrom square on the knee. You could see on the reverse angle from behind the play, the back corner, that it was very severe contact to Lundestrom's knee. And as you know, as you would always say, flip the script. If that's Isac Lundestrom on the forecheck against Sam Reinhart and he does that exact same thing, Panthers fans are going to be losing their minds, asking for an ejection, suspension, fight this guy. And so, yes, Isac Lundestrom is not our Sam Reinhart, but he's still a key player on this team.
No doubt.
And you don't want to see that happen to anybody. And I don't expect, because we haven't heard anything about Reinhart, but I don't expect there to be any discipline from the league because it's a first offense. But I would almost think you would want it if you're Reinhart, because it would keep you out of Tuesday's game. Whereas now, if he's on the ice, Ross Johnston is going to be demanding he answer for that. Ross Johnston is our goon. I don't want to fight Ross Johnston if I'm Sam Reinhart. There's no win for me there. So I have a better likelihood of getting hurt in a fight with Ross Johnston or some other Anaheim Duck than I would if I just took my one-game suspension, sat this one out, and it's the Anaheim Ducks. My team's probably going to win anyway. I'll take my punishment. I'll sit it out. We don't play him again till next year. I'd rather do that if I was Reinhart.
Yeah, and so far as of this recording right now, we don't know the if there is going to be anything, but we have not heard anything from the league for them. But that's the thing about this home and home for the NHL that they're doing. It's how quickly they have to rebound after that. I mean, for Sam Reinhart, only his third major of his career, and the first two were fighting majors in just two of them in the last 3 years. So just goes to show the rare territory that Sam Reinhart found himself in after that. So, but also continuing on in the game, it's for the Cats. Just once again protecting the neutral zone, but also depth players coming through. Even though Mackie Samoskevich didn't get on the score sheet, defense awareness was outstanding for him. Just getting even though he's a right-handed shot, wrapping around to get a stick on Frank Vatrano when he was open in the net, and also the short-handed breakaways that Spencer Knight stopped on Vatrano, getting 3-4 opportunities, and then I believe it was Troy Terry that was following up on it, and then having him and Erod Evan Rodriguez adding more minutes with Sam Reinhart ejected there. I thought those guys really picked it up, and also Sam Bennett, now 20 games of him without scoring, did get 6 shots on goal for the Panthers. Him, Matthew Tkachuk, and Carter Verhaeghe really picked it up for the Panthers there. So just it's going to be interesting to see how the Panthers continue to navigate now that the next part of their schedule is going to be very road heavy. But we are going to continue that conversation going on in the next segment, where we're going to discuss more about the Anaheim Ducks build and also get Doug's opinions on just the veterans and how they are guiding the young Ducks throughout their continued rebuild. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, January 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here with Doug Stolhand of the Puck Podcast. And also, I'm hoping that everybody is enjoying the holiday weekend out there. If you have the day off, I hope that you guys are enjoying your days off, whether it's at the beach or hanging out in the sun. So want to wish everybody out there a great holiday weekend. But Doug, I want to discuss more about the Anaheim Ducks build, because I'm just looking at their just overall their lineup, even especially on the blue line, which is very it's a good mix of veterans and youngsters there. I mean, yes, we were very happy that Radko Gudas got his contract and earned some respect after a Stanley Cup run with the Panthers, and especially being named the captain after. It's crazy the reputation that Radko Gudas got from a guy who was a little rough on the edges, brought sandpaper, getting suspended, and then everything comes together in Florida. He behaves on the ice, and now coming into Anaheim, getting the captaincy there. And also, I mean, people can say the same thing about Brad Marchand, about getting the captaincy in Boston there for all of his antics. But every pair that I'm seeing is a veteran matched with a youngster. I mean, Brian Dumoulin, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, Jacob Trouba, who was just recently with the Rangers and then did make a conference final with Paul Maurice and the Winnipeg Jets. But how are you seeing the mix of veterans and the youth movement that Panther Radko has there in Southern California?
Well, of course, they started the season with Cam Fowler, who was the longest tenured Duck as well, and traded him to St. Louis after acquiring Jacob Trouba, which is kind of an exchange. It was more a thing of the Ducks have been coveting a right-hand shot defenseman to add to this lineup and get 3 in the lineup. So now they have that with Radko Gudas, Jacob Trouba, and Drew Hellison, one of the young players, that they can match. They can get line combinations that work a little bit better for them on each pairing. But Brian Dumoulin was brought in specifically to be a calming influence on this defense. It was very young in the past, still is, and there's a lot of young talent. Olen Zellweger, Pavel Minchikov, Drew Hellison, Jackson Lacombe, all in the NHL. Tristan Leno waiting in the AHL to come up. There's simply not enough room for all of them to play on a nightly basis when you have Gudas, Dumoulin, and Trouba in the lineup. So it's been a rotation, which I think helps the young players a little bit to get that night off to go sit in the press box and watch from above. It kind of slows the game down. You see where you could have made a move, or you get a different perspective on the game. So when you come back in, you're able to put that into action. It also keeps them fresh and keeps them from wearing out. They're not used to still playing that 82-game NHL grind. So I think it's a good rotation, but it needs to end eventually, because these guys are the future and probably the present on blue line for the Ducks. But I do like having Gudas's leadership as a physical defenseman, as you said, that has learned the lessons of how to play physical in the NHL, how to be physical without crossing the line. Brian Dumoulin is absolutely as calm as you can be back there on the blue line, never panics. And that's a calming influence to show the guys how to do it under pressure, how to get the puck out of your zone, how to take that extra second to make the right play rather than panic and turn the puck over and just throw it up the boards. And Trouba comes in with the same thing. That's a guy that was a captain for the New York Rangers. So now you've got leadership from the blue line on this team and veteran leadership as well. So I like the three guys they have. I don't know how much longer they'll have them, and we'll talk about that in a second with the trade deadline. But I like what they've built as far as that mix of veteran and youth. And it's guys coming from outside the organization as well that can tell you how things are done in other organizations, which Cam Fowler could not do because he was a lifelong Duck.
Yeah, and him getting traded before his 1,000th game, just like they did with Corey Perry
Right.
just a few years ago. But even then, I mean, the story of the Ducks the last few seasons was just how many high danger chances they were just giving up over and over again, and just the workload that John Gibson was facing throughout. And even John Gibson faced quite a bit there on Saturday against the Florida Panthers. I mean, but even the Ducks were getting their fair share of chances in the slot. They were getting more odd man rushes than the Panthers. I mean, when the Panthers have their forwards deep and they're getting in on the forecheck, and then you have the defense pinching, that's going to cause the odd man rushes for the other way going for Anaheim, which the Panthers were thankfully able to stop there. You feel like they're a little bit away for Anaheim of just trying to mesh together better. But a lot of young guys on the mix. Cutter Gauthier, Swedish born, but did sport the United States in the World Juniors hero there. But I want to get your thoughts on just not necessarily a return, because he never made his debut for the Philadelphia Flyers, but just I want to get your thoughts on just him playing his first game in Philadelphia after that trade for him.
Well, I mean, I get the reaction from the Philadelphia fans. We in Anaheim certainly had that in the past with Justin Schultz. He was a draft pick of the Ducks that refused to sign with them. We ended up having to trade him. He was not even one of the top prospects in the game, but he was just a good player that we were looking forward to having. But when any player rejects your franchise for any reason, of course you're going to take that personally. Of course you're going to boo that player at every opportunity. So look, the Philadelphia fans have a well-earned reputation for nastiness and vitriol. And I mean, so I don't think they took it beyond the pale. They bought their ticket. They're allowed to say what they want to say. There was nothing physical against him. They weren't throwing stuff. There was nothing to my knowledge of them threatening him at the hotel or anything like that. So yeah, it was a lot of boos. It was a harsh night for him, but that's to be expected every time he plays in Philly for the rest of his career. No doubt. I don't think I think Eric Lindros was spared that by the Nordiques moving to Colorado, because he didn't have to return to Quebec where he turned it. And that's what Ducks fans keep throwing back is, Flyers fans didn't have a problem when Lindros did this. They were very happy to have him. And every team is going to be on the benefiting side and the losing side of this at some point. Some player is not going to want to play there for some reason and want to go somewhere else. So it is what it is. I thought he handled it well. He did, but I wish he had a better game. The next game he came back out and had 2 goals against the Hurricanes. So I was happy to see him put it behind him immediately and have a good game. But I was to be expected and will be expected for Cutter Gauthier, no matter who he plays for the rest of his career.
Yeah, and there's also interesting for the mix that's there for Pat Verbeek's squad is another World Juniors hero, Mason McTavish, for Team Canada just a few years ago, playing for them. And even and it's crazy to think that some of the Ducks prospects, one of them who was left off of the team even this year in Bennett Seneca for them. So you have a mix of guys who had their opportunities to play at the highest of the junior level, and then one that was outside of it for in the case of Seneca, even though there's one highlight that I saw of just an outstanding goal for him. Just I forget what Washington Capitals prospect that was that he got around for them on that goal, but for just overall, just a lot of great young pieces that I'm seeing here for the Anaheim Ducks and just trying to get through. But I do want to talk about a former Panther, Frank Vatrano. It's crazy to think that going back at the start of the Bill Zito era for the Panthers, he was the second line winger for the Florida Panthers. It was him on one of the wings and then Patrick Hornquist on the other at the start of this for the Panthers, along with Alex Wenberg centering that.
Yeah.
Now getting a contract extension for the Anaheim Ducks there. A lot of people thought he was going to be a trade piece for the Ducks, but then he signs an extension. The AAV is down, but for a reason. Doug, tell the audience and break down this a little bit about what the contract details are, because we still like Frank Vatrano here, the Boston native who actually ended his Florida Panthers tenure on a high note, scoring 2 goals against the San Jose Sharks right before he got traded to the New York Rangers in that trade. But tell us a little bit about that Frank Vatrano contract.
Yeah, it's a very unique one, and it's caused some consternation around the league because of the way it is worked. So it's on paper, if you look it up and you say, well, what did he just sign with the Ducks? It's a very fair deal for them, right? It's a contract that takes him to 2028 with a contract of just $4.571 million. So a 3-year deal, less than $4.6 million for him. Seems like a very fair deal for a guy that scored 30 goals last season. Why would he take such little money? Because there's deferred payments of basically $9 million that are not going to start until well after he's retired. And they're going to make $900,000 payments to him every year for 10 years. And that does not go on the cap somehow. And it seems like an incredible loophole. And it's something that they will probably have to address down the road. But by then the cap has gone up significantly and the Ducks will have no problem having a $900,000 dead cap hit on their contract way down the road. So why this came about and why the Ducks kind of got ahead of this. And I think it's something the Sharks and Kings will emulate as quickly as they can before the NHL shuts it down. And every other team in New York and states that have state income tax. The reason they're doing this is because Frank Vatrano can then retire, live somewhere other than Southern California or California in general, and get that money without having to pay the state income tax. So he's getting half his salary essentially taxed at a much lower rate down the road. That means a lot more money in his pocket. And if they can do this with every player, I mean, it's an incredible advantage to the Ducks. And it's an incredible advantage to every NHL team, really. If they said, we're going to give you deferred payments, we're going to spread them out over a long period of time. It's going to keep our short-term cap down so we can sign more players, but it's going to give you the money you want. And you could do this multiple times. Frank Vatrano, when he's a UFA in 2028, could do this again and be getting the $9 million he's getting from the Ducks in deferred payments, get another $10 million in deferred payments from another team. He could be making in retirement as much money as he made when he played. And this could become the Bobby Bonilla contract of the NHL, where he's getting $1 million every July 1st from the New York Mets to this day. And Bobby Bonilla hasn't played for many decades. So it's a genius move by the Ducks. I like it. I love that Vatrano was willing to take it because it helps them retain him. I thought for sure he was going to be a trade deadline move. It helps them retain him and also keeps a very low price, and it sets a precedent for the rest of the team. If they want to re-sign there, this is a deal that's available. This is an opportunity that's available, and it helps them still keep their cap flexibility to go out and potentially add somebody at the deadline or in free agency this summer to make a splash while still having Vatrano under contract.
Yeah, maybe this changes the perspective a little bit of trying to get to that next step for Anaheim, and just saying, hey, we're trying to get over. We're not trying to be a bottom 5 team anymore, and just like the fact that, hey, we have proven that we could actually retain players, and that this is a mix that we can do going forward for that. That's another thing, and also. It's crazy, the debate of whether do you want the money now and invest it or get it later when you're not. So that's everyone. It's personal for everyone on what they want to do there. So I don't know how many of it, how that split will be if I were to just randomly put a poll out there. But hey, he's not the first player in California to get a contract with deferred payments. Look at just Shohei Ohtani out there.
That's right.
with
Not
Dodgers.
nearly as lucrative as Shohei, but certainly the Ducks got the idea from them. And it's one that, as you said, I think it sets a great message to the league and to the locker room that the Ducks can retain veteran talent. Frank Vatrano is a guy that has not won a Stanley Cup, is a 30-goal scorer, is chasing that glory, and had the opportunity to be a UFA this coming summer. And had an opportunity to say, I want to be traded at the deadline and go to a cup contender to potentially chase that. And instead, he said, I want to stay here. I want to be a part of what they're building in Anaheim. And that, again, sends the message to the young players that veterans want to be here. It sends a message to other veterans around the league that this is a place you want to play. It's a great message because otherwise, they trade him, they trade Brian Dumoulin, they make some moves at the deadline. It's like typical selling off the veteran pieces. Who are we going to buy as rentals in free agency this year that we trade next March? I think it was a very surprising and very pleasing signing for the Anaheim Ducks.
No doubt, and hopefully for Frank Vatrano, he for sure finds success over there out in Southern California. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss more about the next part of the home and home and more. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Select Quote. And in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 200 million customers find $700 billion in coverages since 1980. And it's more affordable than you think. You get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonNHL. Get selectquote.com/lockedonNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonNHL. Select Quote. They shop, you save. Third and final segment here on this Monday, January 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So the Panthers returned to practice today. Some of the players were sporting some of the Four Nations gear that they will be wearing for the tournament coming up in just a few weeks. And also, I want to say congratulations to Alexander Barkov, Finnish athlete of the year, the first hockey player to ever do so. So not even Jari Kurri nor Teemu Selanne have ever gotten the honors ever. And that has been an award given out since the 1940s. But Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad didn't practice, but the expectation is for Ekblad to hopefully return on Tuesday night against the Anaheim Ducks. They went 2-3-1 without Aaron Ekblad. And Panthers, with the exception of the Ducks game recently, have given up quite a bit on the PK for them. So hopefully this is a little bit of a boost to the lineup for them. And very important for the Panthers to get in for this road trip, because 3 back-to-backs before Four Nations, 4 of them the rest of the way. Spencer Knight, once again, outstanding in the first one. Has stopped 93 shots in his last 96 faced for him. So great performance out of him lately. But Doug, we spoke about the stacking of the assets, and then it's what the age trade deadline is going to be. I spoke to you about the Ducks having top 10 picks in the last 5 drafts for them. And what's the deadline going to look like this year for them? Because some of the conversation has been, will John Gibson get traded? I know there's a year left on the deal for him. So what's the trade deadline do you think that's going to look like for them this year?
Well, there's actually 2 full seasons left on John Gibson's deal, which complicates it even more. So they would have to probably retain some value in that deal if they were to trade him. I don't see him being traded personally. I just don't see a team looking to take on that kind of term with him. A guy that he's certainly a good goalie, but unless you're absolutely desperate for goaltending, I can't see a team making that move. There's other options, and we've seen them around the league. So I expect him to be on the team again next season, potentially getting traded at the deadline next year or in the off season this coming year, but not before the deadline. Brian Dumoulin almost assuredly will be traded because he's an expiring deal. There's no reason to retain him. He does have some pull in that. He has a modified no trade clause, so he's got a 10-team no trade list, which of course he could waive if he gets to an opportunity to go. Brock McGinn, who's currently on IR, is also on an expiring deal, could be a depth player if some teams looking for that, but minor pieces. The big piece, I think, would be Robbie Fabry. He's an expiring contract. He's a goal scorer. He's a very good high-energy player. I think there's value. If you're a good team chasing a Stanley Cup, Robbie Fabry is a great guy to add to your second or third line as a goal-scoring depth move that is still going to give you honest minutes defensively, give you 100% effort, and be a guy that you can put over the boards in a high-stress situation with some confidence. He's a veteran. So that's, I think, the big piece. Then there's, of course, the rumors around Trevor Zegras. Will he or will he not get traded? But my hope is that Pat Verbeek uses this deadline not to sell, but to add. And I'm looking at a guy like JT Miller. Why not call up the Canucks and say, we would love to take a veteran center off your hands that can help us and move everybody down one slot. If JT Miller can be our first center and Leo Carlsson becomes our second center and Mason McTavish becomes our third center, that helps everybody down the lineup. And we need his presence as a veteran scorer because he's obviously unhappy in Vancouver. Let's make a deal. I was just talking with Trevor Beggs of the Locked On Canucks podcast this past week on the Puck podcast about potential deals. And we were saying, they need defense. We need centers. We'll send you a young defenseman, a Jackson Lacombe, for example. If it gets, if I'm the GM of the Ducks, that would be a deal I would be willing to make because we have the youth movement on defense. So it'll be interesting, but I hope that's the kind of move that Pat Verbeek tries to make, is to add veteran talent that is still under contract with term left on their deal, rather than be a seller and try and do it in free agency, because it's tougher to sign players in free agency. It's a lot easier to get them traded here. And then once they're here, they like it, like Frank Vatrano, and maybe they re-sign.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because you see, for example, a Jason Zucker in Buffalo, who you have to give him more on the AAV to try to convince him to give your market a chance. While if someone is traded there, they at least, of course, even if they say they don't want to play, they'll at least have to report and at least give it a shot. And for Anaheim, at least a first round pick in each of the next three seasons, one in 2026 for them. So that could help make that trade hopefully happen for them. Also, a lot of crazy things have happened in the league recently. I mean, you have the cross checks of McDavid in that Canucks Oilers game. You have Spencer Knight tried the goalie goal after Nedeljkovic got his, and then a goalie goal attempt by the Bruins ended up costing them for them. So for the Anaheim Ducks here, it's crazy that for trying to get out of there, out of the basement. What do you think is the floor for the Ducks the next few years, and just what would be the year that you pinpoint is the year that, okay, the expectation is to be in the postseason?
I would say next season, because the reason I say that is they've progressively been getting better. They bottomed out a couple years ago. They got slightly better last year, but this year they're on a pace to be much better. They had 59 points last season. And they already have 42 this season with 36 games left to play. So the opportunity for them to be in the 70-point range this season is there. And that's a marked improvement based on what we've seen in recent years. So they're making improvement. It's not as fast as some fans would want. But the key part that I look at, and Panthers fans know this from Saturday's game, the power play is awful in Anaheim. It is a league second worst in the league at just over 12%. So when you get that 5-minute major against Sam Reinhart, and you get to go out there, and Sam Reinhart, by the way, has more shorthanded goals this year than any Duck has power play goals. So that tells you how bad the Ducks power play is and how good he is shorthanded. So you get Sam Reinhart off the ice, their best shorthanded player and threat to score, and you get a 5-minute power play and you don't capitalize. And it gives the momentum going into the intermission, gives the momentum to the Panthers of we've killed this off. It's still 0-0. Now we take over the game and we win. And you see the Ducks are having problems. So if the Ducks can find a way to get their power play fixed, let's say it's just league average. That's an extra 12 goals they've scored on the power play this year. They've lost a lot of 1 and 2 goal games. That changes those outcomes. So now instead of being a 70, 75 point team, now you're an 85, 90 point team and you're in a playoff race. And as the youth develops, I think next year should be the expectation of they're going to make the playoffs next season. They have 2 good goalies. They have a loaded young defensive core. They have loaded young prospects at forward. They need something to fix this offense and get it producing more goals so that they can actually win these games, and rather than losing 3-2, 3-1, 2-1 games, start winning some games, be a little bit more of a threat. The defense and the goaltending is there. They just need to figure out the scoring, which is, of course, the toughest part of hockey to do, is score goals.
Yeah, and the Panthers only allowing 2 shots on the entire 5-minute power play for the Ducks there, and that was the big momentum shift I felt for the Panthers.
For sure.
Once the second period started, they only having 26 seconds left to start the second period. But then, Pat Verbeek is trying to build off of some of Bob Murray's picks, like McTavish, Zellweger, Lacombe, and Dostal, along with what he's trying to do there. And still questions on whether Greg Cronin is going to be there, because we were speaking off the record on just what Ilya Lyubushkin spoke about exiting Anaheim. So maybe a change in the guard is coming next season.
I certainly hope so. I don't even want it to be next season. I want it to be today, tomorrow, the Four Nations tournament. Like, Greg Cronin has had now 18 months, which is not a long time, and yes, the team has gotten progressively better as far as producing more points, but the offense is terrible. And when you look at forget the analytics. I'm not going to get into the weeds of the analytics numbers. Let's look at the stuff we all understand. Ducks are dead last in winning faceoffs in the league. So they're starting almost every shift without the puck on defense. That's no good. Their penalty kill is 28th. They're not killing penalties when they take them. So you can't play as aggressively because you're afraid to be shorthanded because your penalty kill is killing you. Your power play is second worst in the league. When you get a power play opportunity, you're not capitalizing on it. And when you're actually just the legitimate scoring goals, 5-on-5, they're dead last in the NHL in goals per game. That can't stand. And he made a change in assistant coaches. So we've got a different power play coach. We've got a different penalty kill coach. The results are the same. And at some point, you have to try something different. And before you start making roster moves, I think you owe it to the roster to try a different coach. And I'd like to see, for the end of this regular season, that's why I say I want it to be today, tomorrow, before the end of the season. I want to see what this roster looks like under a different coach with a different approach, because we've seen in Detroit the difference that made. And that team went from night to day very quickly when Todd McClellan came to town. Yeah, it's the same roster, and they just seemed like they're having more fun at the rink. I want to see that happen in Anaheim. If it doesn't, then we know the problem is in the locker room and not behind the bench, and we owe Greg Cronin an apology. But I would rather, Greg Cronin has no track record of success in the NHL as head coach. He hasn't put together an offense that is even average. We're just aspiring to be bad offensively, not awful. I would like to see a different coach, and I was talking with some fans about it this past weekend. They said, well, who would you get? Bring back a former Ducks coach, Bruce Boudreau. Let him coach out the regular season. Tell him this is not a long-term deal, Bruce. You're here for for the rest of the regular season, and we'll talk in the offseason. If things go well, maybe you get a long-term contract, but do a proper search in the offseason. But let's try a different approach than Greg Cronin behind the bench, because it is not working offensively.
Sounds similar to what the Senators did with Jacques Martin recently, bringing him for the end of the season. Then
correct,
and then going on with Travis Green there. And you mentioned the faceoffs for the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, it was rare to even see a D-zone draw for the Panthers in the third period once the Panthers did go to shutting it down. But again, it really just credit. It really goes to the Panthers on just how well they were able to protect that neutral zone and then just eliminating their speed for them. But Doug, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. You can follow Doug and Eddie's show, the Puck Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And you could also follow them on all the social media channels at Puck Podcast. So Doug, I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Yes, good luck to the Panthers this as they defend their Stanley Cup, and we will see how it goes down this season. But as a former expansion brother from back in '93, and I remember those days, that's when I first got on board with the Ducks. It's great to see the Panthers having success. The Ducks have got a Stanley Cup as well. Both teams deserve it. Both fan bases deserve it. I appreciate the time joining your show, and good luck. Talk to you later on this season.
Thank you. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Doug Stolhand, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.